This is the Marriage Podcast, and I'm your host, Alexandra Stockwell. I'm a physician turned relationship and intimacy expert, and I specialize in showing couples how to have incredible, passionate relationships. I myself have been married for 25 years. My husband and I have 4 children and full professional lives, and we've created an amazing relationship. If you want to deepen your understanding of your own relationship and learn to access new heights of emotional, sensual, and erotic intimacy, you're in the right place because I will show you how. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, this is Alexandra, and you are in for a treat speaking with Dr. Elizabeth Treynor and Dr. Charles Stillman, otherwise known as Chuck and Liz. And let me just say, for those of you who've heard actually any other of the prior 29 episodes, you know that I never read a bio because to me, it's more interesting to just tell you my experience of the people that I'm talking to, and then they can add to that as they wish. Today may be the only exception. Even if I get to 1,000 episodes, I may never do this again, but they have written the most fantastic bios that I'm going to go ahead and read them. So Liz is the radiant to Chuck's radiologist. That's right, he's a physician. And the pathological to her own pathologist. She's also a physician, and that description comes from their wedding toast. Liz is an experienced mom, avid yogi, and iPhone photographer, novice surfer, budding podcaster. I would say budding podcaster, not so budding in enthusiasm. Loves hiking new hills and tandem biking new trails with Chuck. Afraid of heights, but peeks over the edge anyway, finding her voice and embracing the bold. Quit makeup and hair coloring this year, both of which Chuck finds sexy as hell. Now, with that kind of an introduction, you know that Chuck is either a kind of monotone guy who just is backed up against the wall, devoted and loving his bold, outrageous, colorful wife, or he matches her 1 for 1 in being innovative, unpredictable, and entirely mesmerizing. And it's the latter which is the case. Chuck is a radiologist, soon to retire Army colonel. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
One-time hang glider and airborne jumper, passionate golfer, musician, songwriter, guitarist, poker player, dad who gives really good text, funny, witty, kind, loving, great teacher, and best golf coach Liz ever had. Willing to try anything, he is the water to balance her fiery energy. And I think I would say, from my experience of the two of you, that balance isn't quite the right word. It's more like harmonize, because I think of balance as kind of neutralizing, and there is just nothing that even smells like neutrality around the two of you. So
I like harmonize better too, because I was thinking it's not like you're putting out the fire and then I smell like ashes. It's more, yeah. So, but yes, we complement each other.
Very fair.
Very well, I'd say.
Okay, so anything that you want to add to that, Liz?
Well, let's see. I think that's a pretty good summary. That was pretty much just off the top of my head last night. I was so tired when I got your text, and I thought, okay, let me see what I can just come up with, and that was just kind of what spilled out. So,
well, it really feels like you, which is why I read it in a way that I just usually don't, because bios don't usually feel like the people, even if they're truthful.
Yeah. So it's all from the heart, which is kind of how I lead my life. Is just heart wide open. Here I am, love it or leave it. So
okay, beautiful. Chuck, anything you want to add?
No, that pretty much sums it up. I like to joke with my friends that we look really good on paper, and I'm conscious of the fact. Yes.
Oh, I was going to say that a couple times we've been thought we were brother and sister.
Yes, you can. Yeah,
and then we kiss and shock them all.
Oh my goodness. Well, actually, that reminds me, there's some Instagram account. I forget what it's called, but my kids are obsessed with it. I have 4 children. My 9-year-old isn't obsessed with it, but my older ones up to 24 are, where people submit pictures and then people have to guess, are they lovers or spouses or siblings? And it is not very easy to tell. So I love that you play with people's assumptions in this way.
We do have
What were
fun.
you going to say,
It's
Chip?
happened more than one. No, I was just to say that, that we acknowledge that we look really good on paper. Like if we were sitting and comparing,
We look cute in pictures too.
Yes, that my point though being that that for new people that are meeting us, if you heard our bio or our resume, it could be intimidating, and I'm very conscious of that. I have a massive Twitter following of maybe like 40 people, but I on there I call myself just some dude, because that's how I think of myself, and that's how I think about us. Is yeah, we look good on paper, but we really are very laid back, and don't go in for all the pomp and circumstance of being big fancy doctors. It's just no. I'd much rather have a beer after a round of golf with some friends, or just go get lost in the woods, than I would go into a big tuxedo dinner and all those other things.
I really love that you say that. And I'll just tell you honestly, for me, I am a doctor and a doctor's wife. And I have been, and I was born in 1968. I'm 53 years old. And I feel like during my career, these things have really evolved. And when I first entered medicine and in the years following, and particularly actually when I lived in rural Kansas, being a doctor's wife meant something very specific. And there was just about zero overlap with the identity of being a doctor's wife and how I experienced myself. And when I said that I was also a doctor, they really didn't know what to do with that, because then I wasn't part of their club, except I was part of their club. And anyway, I just feel like what you have articulated is important for people to hear, because many people listening are physicians, everyone listening is a patient, and we are evolving past having our doctors be restricted and put in the box of a particular role with or without a white coat on any given day. So I love that you presence that. And I would actually like to shift into a different role and how you defy stereotypes. Because I went to college in Annapolis, Maryland, across from the Naval Academy. I had a
Oh,
lot
wow.
of experiences of midshipmen. One of my closest friends is, she used to be a naval officer. She's now a homeschooling mother of 6, but she's got a master's in biological weapons and is married to a man who, it's not 35 years like you. I forget exactly how many years in the Navy. And in general, someone who has been serving our country in the military, following the internal and external codes of conduct, and having all the responsibilities that anyone who has been in the military that long necessarily has, there's often a kind of steel rod in the spine, metaphorically speaking, a kind of
Sure.
buttoned up quality. And the way that you have so much kind of flexibility and warmth, is that also kind of radical and pioneering in the military context, or is that just a kind of outdated stereotype as well?
Well, it depends on who you ask, and it depends on which section of the military you're in. Over my 35 years, I started out as an enlisted soldier in the 1st Cavalry Division. In that environment, absolutely, you're dealing with very strict. I had sergeants that would yell at me if I stepped out of line, and you learn to be very regimented. Then the military put me through college and medical school, and now I'm in the medical corps with a completely different mindset. People that are definitely used to showing their humanity a lot more as physicians. And some of the best physicians I've ever known came out of the military, and that wasn't necessarily always the case. Back even when after I was in the military for some time, certainly physicians at the VA had a really bad reputation for being substandard physicians. That's no longer the case. And it's certainly no longer the case on active duty. I was active duty for 15 years. And as you progress in the military, you get more comfort You also get more responsibility. People look up to you and salute you. And so you can decide how you want to be. Once you're indoctrinated into the military lifestyle, so you know intuitively what's out of line and what's not out of line, then and you live that lifestyle, everything else is gravy, and you can just be yourself. And I have never, well, it's been a really long time. I joined in 1986. But I can never remember a time, certainly as an officer, where the military, where I felt like I needed to be that rod in the spine, stiff, straight back salute. Even now you can see my hair is a little longer because I'm in the reserves. It's not, I don't feel that way at all.
But I keep trying to get you to help me improve my posture.
That's
'cause
true.
He does have
That's
a
true.
really
I'm
good
constantly
posture. And I keep saying, can you help me remember to throw my shoulders
I just gently
back?
put my hand on her back, and then she stepped straight up.
Yeah, well, you don't do it often enough. I slouch too much. Anyway.
That is so funny. Okay, well, that's a very, I would say, straightforward description, mature description, manly description of what it is to be true to yourself, to be in integrity with the truth of who you are. And with that, I want to bring up another example of it, which I have a lot of questions and a lot of comments about. I had the absolute pleasure of listening to Liz's interview. She was interviewed by Dr. Whaley Gray on the Dare to Dream Physician podcast. And one of the things that Liz shared is that I should mention that this is a second marriage for both of you.
That's
and,
correct.
And so your coming together reflects that in many ways. And in your Match.com profile, Chuck, you said that your children are your greatest priority, and any woman who doesn't understand that really isn't a right woman for you. I don't know if it was that phrasing exactly. And I'd love to ask you how you think about that and kind of what that means to have said it. And let me just step back and say that I have two thoughts about it. One is that is incredible. Any of us with divorced parents would wish it to be so. It's so profound and loving on the one hand. I really mean that. And on the other hand, I think the downfall of many marriages, whether downfall means divorce or just frustration, disconnection, doesn't really matter. But a serious limiting variable in many marriages is putting the children first. It ends up functioning as a way to avoid intimacy and not honor the womanliness and the manliness, and kind of push the erotic energy under the carpet. There's a great deal to say about that. So in general, I think it's really important, not on a first date, of course, but in the context of a committed marriage that you want to flourish for the rest of your days, that you're putting yourself and the marriage first and the children second, which serves them really well. And certainly on a first date, to have that be really clear is so important. So this is some of what's going on in my mind as I ask this question, knowing that if you put that, somebody else might put that as a way to get the chicks, but I'm clear, experiencing you now, that you put that because it's true.
Absolutely. I could fill up several hours of this conversation just talking about my Match.com stories. Liz and I both could. We have some really great Match stories. And backing up to a point you made earlier, is if I was going to brag about anything, it wouldn't be about material things. It would be about the fact that my ex-wife and Liz's ex-husband both came to our wedding. Mm-hmm. And we actually go out together socially on purpose. We all get along. And while we do enjoy each other's company, we all also equally understand that we have children, and it does them no good for us to be fighting all the time. And so it was very easy because of who Liz and I are and who they are, to just be adults and be happy. And so that part was important right from the get-go to both of us. I dated women on Match that were having. I dated one woman who was having screaming fights with her ex-husband on a daily basis, And
What
they've
did
been
turn you
divorced.
on?
Yeah, it's like I did not have energy for that kind of drama. Like that was a screening criterion for me, is like you must be on good terms with your ex.
Yes. Yeah.
And and he had to be a prairie vole, and he had to look that up. We'll get to that later.
She had a test in her match profile for me, and I passed, which is good. And it was easy to pass, but I had to do some research for it, which I thought was pretty neat. But as far as the kids come first thing, that's just how I was raised. But my match profile, and I'm sure Liz's profile as well, evolved, over from the first time the profile was written up until the very last time it was edited. And it's usually edited by your own personal experiences. And, I had dated some younger women who were very, I don't want to say needy, but very much into me, and that was mutual. But there were times where I had my kids, and they said, "Well, I kind of wanted to go out tonight," and I have my kids, and so very quickly in my match profile, I had to write very early in the profile to state, "Hey, kids are number one," and
I don't want any more of them. Thank you very much.
I have a very good story about that as well. But no, I was all done with kids. I was 44 years old at the time. I was very much done with kids at that point, and had to break up my very first date match relationship, which was a very serious relationship, because she wanted kids, and I didn't. I've never followed up, but I hope she's a happy mom somewhere. But it was definitely not going to be with me.
Didn't you go get a vasectomy after that?
I did. My friends called me and said,
just get it done.
Get it done right now.
And then there's nothing more to discuss. Okay. Well, Liz, anything you would add to this in terms of putting the children first? Because you definitely seem like a cherished, adored, totally luscious wife who isn't wanting for, like, you don't feel like someone who feels like you're second. And I'm guessing that you never really did, even as the children were put first.
This is such a great question, because I think this was maybe a learning experience from the first marriage, right? Because when the kids are young, they're so demanding. And I realized that that I wish that we had forged time every week to have a date night, for example. And now that the kids are older, it's so much easier for us to just be spontaneous. And so, the fact that our kids are all 18 and independent, 18 and up and independent, allows us to have a lot more flexibility and try new things and say, hey, let's go to Napa this weekend.
Exactly. We're about to be empty nesters.
Hey, let's go hiking in
Mazel tov.
Yes.
But what I'm getting at, because I know this phenomenon well in other women and in other couples, is there some part of Chuck's heart that you wanted access to that wasn't available to you?
Oh no, I never feel that way at all. I love that he adores his boys. I love that he adores my kids. And that was something else that I felt was so lucky. When we married, a friend of mine, very dear friend of mine, gave me this pile of books about how to be a stepmom. I was like, I don't need these books, because like his kids are so awesome and my kids love his kids, and it's just we're like the mini Brady Bunch. It's too easy, so I
that helped a lot too when we all moved in together. And so here we are, with my two kids and her two kids. I have the oldest and youngest, and she has the two in the middle, and they got along so well that they didn't even need us. And so that was one huge stressor that was pulled out immediately that we didn't have to worry about.
Yeah. And both of my kids have really used Jared, our eldest son, as a sounding board when, they've been struggling with relationships or other things. But it's so nice for them to have a new big brother who just really has an awesome EQ as well as IQ and is able to help them out. But the very first time I met Chuck's kids, They came in through the door and they hugged me. And I was like, oh my God, I love this family. So from the very moment I met your kids, I was in love. I mean, I was falling in love with you, but I wasn't going to tell you that because
that's a whole great story.
Because that's
too.
the other thing too, is he told me on the first date that just be careful because women fall in love with me. And the last 3 women I've dated have all fallen in love with me and told me so by the 3rd date. And so I made a very deliberate note. If I fall in love, I am not going to tell you until the 10th date.
And when did you fall in love with me?
My 4th date. but I didn't tell him until like the 8th. So I'd say that's like the only secret I've ever kept from you.
That's true. I think that.
I love that. He'll tell me if like my outfit looks wrong, and I'll tell you if you smell. So it's like we're very able to just be straight with each other because I am really not good at picking up on subtleties. So I'm like, you have to tell me what you want for your birthday because I won't figure it out.
Right. That's true too.
Yeah. So you need to.
Yeah, have you always known this about yourself, Liz? Or was there some pain and suffering because there was no mind reading happening?
I think this is partly why I love pathology, because I don't have to read between the lines on patients. I can look at the slide and see exactly what the cell is and see exactly what it's staining for.
Will you say what a pathologist is? Because I don't presume that the whole worldwide international non-native English speakers necessarily know what a pathologist is. So will you say?
Oh, sure. So pathology is the study of disease. And so I like to say we're kind of the doctor's doctor because we are the ones, well, I like to say Chuck, as a radiologist, guesses at what the tumor is. And I'm the one who tells you what it actually is.
The only argument we have in our entire marriage is who has the better job. She thinks she has the better job, and I know
have the better job.
That I have the better
I
job.
work in
because I'm allowed to guess.
I work in color. He works in a cave. Anyway. But the point of all that was that so a pathologist is involved. Most of what I do is tissue diagnosis. So when somebody has a biopsy, it comes to me,
and so if someone gets a diagnosis of cancer or lupus or whatever it is, the person telling them probably hasn't made the diagnosis, not with 100% certainty. They have sent samples to you and you're the one who gives the diagnosis, and then it's delivered by the doctor they talk to. Okay, beautiful. So speaking of explicitness, I'm kind of in love with the way that you, Liz, talk about your mental breadth, let me say. And I don't mean intellectual mental breadth, though you have plenty of that, but having, why don't you say, you know what I'm talking about.
So I like to say I'm mentally spiced in the sense that that my brain is sometimes very fiery and full of ideas, like cayenne pepper, and then sometimes my brain is like, what would the opposite of that be? Like, something unsalted.
Low salt, yes.
Yeah, exactly. something with like the absence of spice. So because sometimes my brain functions very well and I have a lot of energy and I don't sleep, and then there are other times when I don't want to get out of bed, and my husband has to drag me out of bed to look at the flowers.
Not physically, but
no, you literally did.
Sometimes
you literally did.
Rarely, but
I find that I take the best pictures when I'm really, really depressed, because I'm able to really focus on nature. And that's iPhone photography is like therapy for me, because it really literally and figuratively forces me to be present in the moment. I ever since I was about 12, I had been I'd go through periods of depression, and then when I was about 16, I'd go through periods of just so much energy, and I didn't want to eat, and so I'd suspected that I'd had a little bit of a flavor of bipolar. And so it's considered there's 2 flavors of bipolar, and I'm the bipolar light, which again is just a label. It's not who I am. I don't like to say I am bipolar, but it's part of the way my brain works, which is sometimes extremely well and sometimes very slowly and not so well. And so it's just a matter of learning to ride out those dark times, which will always come. Life is 50-50. I can't always be at my best, although I'd love to always be at my best. Like my husband is so equal. Like he's like always perfect. He's always up here.
Not true.
But he loves me even when I'm at the nadir of the sinusoid curves and stuff. So, but anyway, so that's
Okay.
my brain.
I appreciate and honor the eloquence with which you describe it. It almost sounds like, this is a funny thing coming to mind, but it makes me think of how Jane Austen would describe a drawing room. Like in a drawing room, that when you read the description, you know what kind of house it is, even though you don't know exactly what happens in it. That there's that kind of a flavor as you describe the way your brain functions. And we're on the marriage podcast. How has navigating the spice and the absence of flavor, that's the low salt element, how is that either enhanced what you share in your marriage, or it doesn't feel like it's detracted from how you talk about it, but let me be open and not make assumptions. How has that river run through your marriage?
Great questions, Alexandra. So when I'm in my energetic place, I'm full of ideas and I'm planning parties and I'm figuring out, like, we're going to go to Japan next winter because I got super cheap tickets on Scott's cheap flights for, $200 round trip each. And I'm like, we'll figure out the details later, but we're going. And so when I'm energetic and spicy, I see possibilities. I see everything as possible, and I am creative, and I put things together and see things in a different way than other people. And so I have a very expansive.
And I want to add, you are so magnetic.
Aww.
Despite the ways in which medicine has evolved and is that there's place for the everyman, if you will, in the way that Chuck was describing before, relatively speaking, there's still sometimes some stodginess. And you just open your arms, open your heart. You're full of creativity and warmth and such beautiful humanity. And I really, like, once you described the spiciness, I understood your magnetism, though it hadn't ever crossed my mind that it was anything other than a pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, well, sometimes I hibernate. But we have developed what we call how many squirrels or how many Red Bulls I'm on. And it correlates pretty well with how much or how little I'm sleeping. They're inversely correlated. So I don't know if you ever saw Over the Hedge, but this was one of these DreamWorks cartoon movies 20 years ago where Hammy the squirrel discovers Coke or Red Bull in the garbage and he drinks it. And then the whole world slows down because his brain is spinning so fast. And so, Chuck, do you want to say anything more about my Red Bull scale?
No, I think there's a lot I could say about it. The first thing is we had a very frank discussion about it very early on in our relationship. And, I feel like, something that's fairly new is that Liz is more willing to talk about and use the term bipolar. We didn't like to use that term early on. And so we did use the Squirrels on Red Bull scale to talk about it. We do talk about it more, openly now with each other. And it was something that Liz was open about very early on, which was really a learning process for me. And now I feel like I could teach a class on how to be married to somebody with bipolar.
You should.
Oh, you should.
I don't know. Well, I don't know how common it is. I'm not a psychiatrist.
Extraordinarily common.
Sorry.
And you wouldn't need to be a psychiatrist. This is we could talk about it more after the podcast, but there is a real art to knowing how to love someone who shows up inconsistently. And what you're describing is that you don't have any difficulty doing that.
I don't, but and I think about this a lot. So there's a couple of reasons why. First of all, you and I are the same vintage, right? I'm 54 years old. I am very comfortable with who I am.
Yes.
And I don't embarrass easily, which is weird because movies that have cringe in it, I can't stand it. I have to hide my head in Liz's shoulder.
I dated so many guys that were so embarrassed by me, and I just love that he can tolerate anything.
But it's true is that if I was going to teach this class, the first thing that I would say to people is, if you are embarrassed by the actions of somebody else, that's your problem. It's not their problem, and you need to figure out who you are first. So that's why I say I'm very comfortable with who I am, and I love Liz. And so if she is spun up, in a manic phase, and may say things, that are, inappropriate, it's not the right word, but unexpected, colorful, unexpected. That's excellent. It's not embarrassing to me. I don't have to apologize for her, and that was extremely freeing for me. And so it was very easy to make that transition. But I can see how other people would not be as comfortable with who they are themselves to be able to handle that.
This is so profound and so amazing what you're saying. And I want to sprinkle my sauce on that and say that the implication of the mighty things you've just said, Chuck, is that whenever you're in one phase or another, Liz, it's not going to create disconnection in your relationship. Never. Because if you're embarrassed, Chuck, or in any way, either overtly or even unconsciously wanting to distance yourself from what is living and expressing in Liz, that creates disconnection in the relationship, and you both feel it. And Absolutely. You being comfortable with who you are is the golden key to maintaining and cultivating connection no matter what is happening. And that is true in any kind of marital context. It is so beautiful how you named that.
Thank you. Yeah. And we the other part of course is having really open and honest discussions about it. And so having when Liz is is on a lot of Red Bulls on the Whirl and Redwood scale, you just got to sort of surf along the waves and ride the tide. But Liz and I had a really deep conversation about what to do when she's down. And the conversation lasted all of about 10 seconds. I said, what do I do when you're down? She says, hold me. I said, okay. And that was the entire conversation.
And you're glad to do that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Liz will tell me when she needs her space, and I'm very respectful of that. And so it was.
And you have dragged me out of bed. There are times when I don't want to get out of bed, and.
But you're saying that with gratitude.
Oh, I am Absolutely. So grateful. Oh my God!
I'm just saying, being dragged out of bed could create resentment, and you're saying it as though it's one of the most loving things a person could do for you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So anything that Chuck has said that surprises you, or anything you want to add to what it's like for the two of you to dance together in this way?
Well, I'm a very concrete thinker, so I started thinking about how we took dancing lessons before our wedding. Now we're going to a dancing workshop in January in Virginia. But no, I think
I'm willing to try anything. I'm a terrible dancer.
And see, that's one of the other things I love about him. You're actually a good dancer. He's got good rhythm.
I'm a musician, so I can keep a beat, but I don't know how to move my hips, and so it's a problem.
No, you're sexy as hell too. I love dancing with you. So I'm just trying to think, is there anything else about that? So, I mean, you'll tell me when you notice it, because you will say, please be careful when you're driving, because you can see that my mind's going 1,000 miles a minute. And I'm thinking about so many things, and he's like,
put the phone in the glove box.
Phone in the glove box. Don't try to be multitasking.
And you do that when he asks, or
oh yeah. No, I'm always appreciative.
Because that's the other interesting thing about the manic swing is there's a little bit of lack of self-awareness. Which is fascinating to me just as a physician, because, and Liz is going to balk it when I say this, because she always does, and I say it all the time, but Liz is the smartest person I know. And
not true.
And it really shows itself when she's on these upswings, and we'll be having a conversation, and she will recall something that is just, mind-blowing, and is able to do it on a regular basis. And but yes, she's this sweet, humble girl who, who also is, is just happy to just, watch silly TV with me on the couch at
And
night.
we are kids, and I just want to say that. I mean, we enjoy and embrace that. We always enjoy that piece of ourselves that's
Absolutely.
playful and.
I think the two of you are outstanding with play, as evidenced with your wedding video. Maybe if you permit it, I can include that in the show notes.
I would love that. Is that okay with you, sweetie?
Of course it's okay.
I'm so proud of that. It was so much fun.
It's just a load of silliness. And you can, the background, of course, is that we are both fans of The Princess Bride. There's a whole story about how it evolved into how we were going to theme our wedding around it. But the video kind of speaks for itself. Liz had a vision for that video that I really was skeptical about. And when we got professional videographers and drone pilots together, and costumes and the whole bit, and the location was perfect, it turned out to be pretty great. I'm sure the video that you saw was that 5-minute preview. There's an hour-long video that goes along with it that we
won't make you watch that.
We won't make you watch that, but it is it's pretty amusing.
Okay, well, that is really fantastic. It's beautiful to hear. I like hearing that there's a little bit of resistance, and then you say yes. It makes it more delicious.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
In every episode, I ask my guests the same question, one question that's the same, because I absolutely believe that relationships are the ultimate vehicle for personal growth. And given that, I'd love to ask you, maybe you first, Liz, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to Chuck?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I can fold that back into something I wanted to say a moment ago about our wedding, which I'm glad you brought that up, because our marriage vows were based on social science research. And so, and I love watching that video, not only because it cracks me up, but because it also reminds me of our vows. And one of which was, I love you not only for who you are, but for who you want to become, and I will support your hopes and dreams. And a couple of the other ones, which we also live and embody every single day, is that I promise to tell you every single day how much I appreciate having you in my life, which I do. We always knock on wood, so I always have to find some wood. There's some wood. We both feel like we won the lottery. And then another vow that I absolutely love, and again, this is so true, is that I do things not out of obligation, but because it delights me to see you happy.
Yeah.
That it's not about keeping score at all. It's just because I just love doing things for you.
I have never once
just
felt,
makes me happy.
It's absolutely true. I've never once felt in this relationship that I needed to do anything to keep score.
Yeah.
I do things because it makes me happy to do them. And I know that Liz will appreciate them.
Oh my God, it really turned me on that he took out all the large garbage this morning.
We have a big garbage pickup.
I said,
tomorrow.
Can I help you take out the toilet? And the next thing I knew, everything was out on the curb. Like, oh my God. I guess they're different languages of love, but that's, the doing stuff that's a good one.
I don't know many people who live their wedding vows as true as we do, but they really were based on social science research, and it seemed like a good way to go. And it's amusing to me, at least, how often we repeat them to each other and smile about because we really lived those vows every day.
That's beautiful. And Chuck, what have you learned about yourself as a result of being married to the amazing Liz?
Wow, it's my tendency is to want to reach for the simple, to say, just the capacity to love. I still love my ex-wife. I think she is an amazing person. I know Liz still loves her ex-husband. He's an amazing person. And they're amazing parents. And so I don't ever want to say that, that I lost the ability to love out of my first marriage. That's not the truth at all. But when I got on Match.com, I didn't do it because I wanted to play the field. I knew that I wanted to find a partner to enjoy this journey with.
That was the Prairie Bowl thing,
Right.
right? You know about is it the Mountain Bowl or the Montane Bowl and the Prairie Bowl,
Right.
right? And that they're a biological model for fidelity, right? So the Prairie Bowl has the longer vasopressin receptor, so that it bonds for life
and mates for life
and mates for life, whereas the mountain bull will fuck anything that moves because it has a short vasopressin receptor, so that the oxytocin doesn't really bind and it doesn't get that connection. And so it's just anyway, I dated too many of the latter, so I was only shopping for Prairie Bowls, and I'm so lucky I found one.
Yeah, and she said that in her profile.
I've never encountered how sexy a Prairie Bowl can be.
I know, right?
Yeah. So when I got on Match, it knew I was looking for somebody to be a partner with, and and to enjoy life together. And so I did have that weird experience where the first woman that I dated told me on the third date that she was in love with me, and I didn't feel the same way back, which was awkward when somebody says, I'm in love with you, and you don't feel it. Do you say it? And so I said, that's nice. And she smiled. She says, oh, you're not ready to say it yet. I said, I'm really not. It's our third date. She said, that's okay. I'll say it for both of us. And that's what the relationship was. She would say, I love you. And I would say, that's nice.
Infantilization and the parenting of the partner begins.
Right. A little bit. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there for sure.
Wow.
And so, then I found out that she wanted to have kids, and I eventually had to do the adult thing and say, hey, you're going to
vasectomy.
Well, after the relationship was over, I said, you're going to be an amazing mom, but it's not going to be with me. And we had to break up. But then I really felt like here was this woman. I never felt like I was going to fall in love again. I was not successful with women before I got married. I was married for 17 years, and I was worried that I was going to revert back to that awkward kid who just didn't know how to talk to women and didn't know how to go on dates. And here I am falling in, a woman falls in love with me on the first, the first out of the gate, and I have to turn her away. And I felt, sad and a little lost, like, I don't know what to do. And then the very next woman that I dated on Match on the third date told me that she was in love with me. And so it did a lot for my confidence. And so I matured very rapidly over the long 9 months that I was on Match.com before I went on my first date with Liz. And so
I caught him at the right time. He'd already sowed his oats.
We talk about that a lot.
He was ready.
9 months to ripen. There's some biological wisdom there.
It's a long way to answer your question, but as far as learning about myself, I knew who I was when Liz and I had our first date, and so then I didn't really have a lot of growing to do at that point. The rest of the time has just been enjoying each other and experiencing new things together.
Yeah,
that's been the growth.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was going to say too, is like when I finally met you, I had come to the place where I was not going to compromise on any single thing anymore. I'd compromised in the past, and I wasn't going to compromise on anything anymore. And that's when I found you on Match. And I
worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well. And that night I was supposed to go out with 4 girlfriends, and every single one of them canceled for a different reason. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm here all alone. I guess I'll look on Match again. I'll just see what's there. And then lo and behold, the algorithm said, you might like this handsome dude. And I'm like, oh my God, he's too perfect. Oh, he's a doctor. He's probably a surgeon. I'll probably have some lame schedule. And then I found out, my email was, hi, Dr. Chuck, what's your specialty? Warmly, Dr. Liz. And then when I found out you were a radiologist, I'm like, yes, he has a life. Because I didn't really want to date an internist or a surgeon.
I love that. And I want to say that I particularly value what you've said about not wanting to compromise, because I don't know if the two of you are aware, but the name of my book is Uncompromising Intimacy, because I think that when you know who you are and love yourself fully and learn how to love and accept your partner fully, that's when you have passion for the rest of your life. So my book is about how to do that in a very kind of
Mhm.
step by step and story rich way. But what you've articulated is the bottom line, which obviously works for the two of you. And I know it works for anyone who chooses to apply it in their unique way. And this conversation would be incomplete without really inviting you, Liz, to talk about your podcast, which, as I understand it, I feel like it's about all of the things we've been talking about in this conversation, but with very different wrapping. Like it's a similar essence. I feel like our podcasts are related to one another, even though the language and the concepts through which you share the message is very different. So do you want to talk
Yeah,
about that? Because
thank you.
anybody who
Right.
enjoys what you shared might be very interested to listen.
Right. Well, so it's called Mind Surfer MD. And the mission of the podcast is, I like to phrase it in a positive way, which is to rediscover joy. But the mission is to normalize conversations about mental wellness and ultimately to 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 promote discussions that will destigmatize mental illness. Like Chuck was saying, it's only very recently that I've had the courage to come forward and say, you know what, this is the way my brain works. And I think if people were less afraid to be able to say, hey, you know, how are you? Like, how are you? That we might be able to promote more connection. And ultimately, I part of my mission is I want to connect people to resources that they might not otherwise be aware of when they're in a difficult place, and again, just uh, to normalize discussions about suffering, because we all suffer in different ways, and I think it can be so isolating, and I really would love to connect my audience to one another, to hear what their issues are, and to ultimately normalize discussions about mental wellness. And so anyway, so it's still a work in progress.
Well,
And
if you have a link, we'll include it in the show notes. If
okay,
you don't have a link, you can tell it to me and we'll add it
okay,
retroactively, because I think what you're creating is a revolution waiting to be born, and you're a wonderful ambassador for it. So that
oh,
is
thank
just
you
so
so much.
beautiful.
Thank you.
And Chuck, any final words as we conclude this conversation?
No, that's it. I was nervous about it. You were wonderful. I didn't know which way we'd be going. As we were joking before that we started talking, I fully expect that I'm going to be forced to become president of the United States one day, and wanted to make sure I wasn't going to say anything that's going to prevent that from happening. I don't think we did. So thank you
I
for
think
that.
quite the contrary. I think you've locked up a lot of the vote if they listen to this conversation.
Yeah.
So this was a lot of fun. I
Thank
appreciate that
you.
very much.
Thank you so much for including us on this. It was such an honor, Alexandra. I really am very grateful to be here with you today.
Well, you're most welcome, and it's an honor for me. I think the two of you, within yourselves and very much collaboratively with one another, have created something which is exquisite. And as you both know, and I've said a number of times on this podcast, mammals learn through imitation. And of course, as human beings, we are mammals. And I think one of the ways to really improve relationships is to make more models available that are worth imitating and worth learning from. And I definitely think what the two of you have shared in this conversation will provide that for many listeners. So thank you.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Marriage Podcast. Please rate and review the show on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And if you have a question or a comment, reach out to me via my website at alexandrastockwell.com.